The Pope is a star with approval ratings politicians in Washington can't even begin to imagine. And today, Pope Francis is making history as he becomes the first Pope ever to speak to a joint meeting of Congress.
The Pope is taking on some hot political topics while he's in Washington, from the environment to religious liberty. Jennifer Wishon brings us the story from the White House.
His passion for people, a seeming magnetic draw to the weak, and his humble lifestyle in a world of excess have Americans clamoring for a chance to see Pope Francis. It's his first visit to the U.S., and today he becomes the first pontiff to address a joint session of Congress, a distinction the Pope calls an honor.
I hope, as a brother of this country, to offer words of encouragement to those called to guide the nation's political future.
Speaker John Boehner, a Roman Catholic, prepared a special platform for the Pope to greet the sea of Americans watching his address broadcast on monitors on the Capitol lawn. The White House opened its gates to some 11,000 people for the Pope's arrival ceremony.
It was amazing, and I felt so blessed to listen to the Pope and our president.
President Obama says the Pope reminds us that God's most powerful message is mercy.
In your humility, your embrace of simplicity, in the gentleness of your words, in the generosity of your spirit, we see a living example of Jesus' teachings.
In a move that pleased the White House, Pope Francis praised the president for working on cutting air pollution as part of his plan to take on global warming.
That climate change is a problem we can no longer be left to a future generation.
White House officials say they hope the Pope's moral authority helps them advance issues high on their agenda, like climate change and immigration reform. But they've been careful to distance themselves on issues where there's clear disagreement, like gay marriage, birth control, and abortion. Those are issues the Pope's more conservative supporters hope to hear more about today on Capitol Hill. Defending himself against conservative criticism, Pope Francis denied this week that he leans to the left and added that he's never said anything beyond the social doctrine of the Catholic Church. Despite efforts on both sides of the aisle to politicize the Pope's words, some Catholics say they're staying above the fray.
As a professing Catholic and practicing Catholic, we stay true to our ethics and we move forward to let people do their talking, and we let our hearts and our faith speak for itself.
After leaving Washington, Pope Francis and his Pope-mobile will travel to New York City and Philadelphia to wrap up his heavily watched visit to the United States.
God bless America.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, the White House.
Well, let's go to other news, and there's a sharp contrast here. Saudi Arabia has a tent village, 3 million tents. They're all air-conditioned. And you look at the just the exodus of Muslims from Syria, from Iraq. Is Saudi Arabia opening their doors to these refugees? Is it saying, come to our tent village, we'll provide for you? No, they're all being forced into Europe and forced into Christian nations. The United States is opening its doors, but Saudi Arabia isn't. But now there's been a stampede because the Hajj is on, and the death toll has been rising from that stampede today in Saudi Arabia. Ephraim Graham has that story from the CBN newsroom. Ephraim?
Gordon, that death toll has now climbed to more than 700, and it could still go even higher. The stampede happened at the annual Islamic pilgrimage known as the Hajj. Authorities say the stampede happened 3 miles from the Islamic holy city of Mecca, where some 2 million people are taking part this year. The incident is the deadliest disaster at the Hajj since 2006. Saudi officials are working to figure out what triggered the stampede. Here at home, Hillary Clinton is doubling down on Obamacare. The Democratic frontrunner is on the campaign trail this week, not only defending the president's controversial health care law, she's also promising to build on it with her own proposals. George Thomas brings us the story.
On the campaign trail,
every American deserves quality, affordable health care.
Hillary Clinton is talking health care. announcing her plans to restrain costs. Among her ideas is to place a monthly cap of $250 on out-of-pocket prescription drug costs to help patients with chronic or serious health conditions.
It can mean the difference between a family being financially secure or going bankrupt.
Her proposals also include new tax credits for low-income families and ending tax breaks for pharmaceutical companies that spend more money on marketing than on research. But perhaps the biggest headline came during a stop in Baton Rouge.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm not going to let them rip away the progress we've made.
When she promised to build on President Obama's health care law, usually called Obamacare, and defend it against Republican opposition.
I'm not going to let them tear up that law, kick 16 million people off their health coverage, and force this country to start the health care debate all over again. Not on my watch.
But that position could be a political stumbling block. The Real Clear Politics average of 5 polls finds that 48% of the public opposes the law, while only 40% favor it. And Clinton took another position this week favored by liberals.
Therefore, I oppose it.
With her announcement opposing the Keystone XL oil pipeline,
I don't think it's in the best interests of what we need to do to combat climate change.
some analysts believe Clinton is staking out her positions on the left to appeal to her base, as she faces challenges from Socialist Democrat Bernie Sanders and possibly Vice President Joe Biden. Even though some of her positions, like supporting Obamacare, may help her with Democratic voters in the primaries, if she does win the nomination, she would have to face the general public, which has been against Obamacare for years. George Thomas, CBN News.
The White House is rolling out the red carpet twice in 1 week. In addition to the Pope, President Obama is hosting a state dinner for China President Xi Jinping. The meeting comes as the communist nation works to remake its sluggish economy and clean up its stifling air pollution. China's president has spent much of the week in Washington state talking to energy firms about potential business relationships. The White House says President Obama will be firm with China's president about his nation's cyber attacks against the U.S. Some American business leaders say the president needs to get tough with China on a variety of issues.
We can't go on indefinitely handing over slices of our economy and expect to remain a world power, expect to have the industrial base to support our military, and the wealth to have a decent and fair economy at home.
The White House state dinner for China's president is scheduled for Friday. Imprisoned American pastor Saeed Abedini could be facing new charges in Iran. The American Center for Law and Justice reports Abedini was summoned for intense questioning this week. Saeed told his family he was verbally and physically abused, and officers repeatedly used a taser gun on him, and the interrogators threatened him with new criminal charges. This Saturday marks the 3rd year of Abedini's captivity. He is serving an 8-year sentence in one of Iran's toughest prisons for sharing his Christian faith. He has been forced to spend weeks in solitary confinement despite the persecution. Naghmeh tells CBN News his faith remains strong. This week, she met with the United Nations General Assembly asking members to sign a letter calling for Pastor Saeed's release. The letter received 67 signatures. Naghmeh is also hoping Pope Francis can help get Saeed released from prison. Our Heather Sells recently spoke with Naghmeh about a special prayer campaign for Pastor Saeed. You can learn more about it at cbnnews.com. Gordon?
Well, let's be in prayer for him. Let's join in prayer and for the calls for his release. It's been 3 long years, and there's an 8-year sentence. If they're going to add additional charges, who knows how long it will be. But we need to pray. God will answer our prayers if we plead with him for his release, so let's do that.